Can a sewing bird help me stitch one-handed? Well, maybe not this kind of bird, though it amazes me how they can stitch a nest together using nothing but their beaks. Let's take a look at some options to assist with stitching one-handed. Have you ever tried stitching one-handed? As you may know if you watched my last video, I broke both bones in my left forearm several weeks ago. I'm not able to grip anything between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to be in a brace for several weeks after the cast comes off. I already know that my hand and grip strength is going to be fairly weak, and it will take a while to recover. And that potentially means months without stitching, and I really miss stitching. Stay tuned to see how I make a sewing bird to help me keep stitching. I was thinking about what I could use to hold my stitching since I can't physically hold anything while I have this cast, and I remembered that I had something called a sewing bird. Historically, a sewing bird was used as a third hand to assist while sewing long, narrow seams by hand. The way a sewing bird works is that you open the beak, which is a clamp, and place the fabric that you're sewing into the clamp, and then it helps provide tension while you're stitching. This reproduction sewing bird isn't very strong, and it doesn't hold the fabric securely enough to actually put any tension on it, rendering it just a pretty object rather than something useful. Years ago, when I was sewing bridesmaid dresses for supplemental income, I made my own sewing bird out of a C-clamp. I knew I still had it somewhere, and after looking through several boxes of supplies, I was able to find it. It's a little worse for wear. It's coming apart, and it's pretty dirty and dusty. I haven't used it in years, so I thought I would refresh it a little so I can use it again. I put a new cover on it, but after trying it out, I realized that it needs a fairly thick surface to clamp onto, and my current sewing table is only a ½ inch thick. So the only way I can use it is to open the drawer and clamp onto the drawer front, which actually makes it very awkward to use. I had a rummage through the tool chest and found this small clamp that I never use, and I thought it would make a great alternative for a new one. The supplies needed to make the sewing bird are fairly simple. You'll want a small C-clamp that has a small bar rather than a knob. I recommend finding a clamp that will fit your surface, yet leave extra room for adjustment. You'll also need some scraps of yarn. I prefer wool since it's better for pins and needles, but truthfully, any yarn will do. You'll also need a scrap of quilt batting, a scrap of cotton or muslin fabric, some strong thread such as cotton quilting thread, a needle, and some scissors. I also used a couple of felt pads like the ones used to cushion cabinet doors to pad the clamp surfaces. First, figure out how far down the yarn can be wound. It shouldn't be such a big ball that the clamp can't be tightened appropriately. Then start winding yarn around the bar in a figure-8 fashion. As it fills up, wind in different directions to fill it out into a more circular ball. Finish off by weaving the end under another strand or two. Next, measure the ball and cut a circle of quilt batting the same diameter. Using a doubled length of thread with a large knot, stitch around the edge in a 1/4 inch running stitch, but don't tie or cut off the threads just yet. Thread the needle through the loop of the doubled thread at the knot. Center the batting on the ball and then gently pull the gathering thread to tighten. The batting will help even out the surface of the yarn ball and gives a smoother surface to pin to. Once you have achieved the desired tightness, fasten off the gathering threads and clip. Trim away any excess batting. Next, cut a cotton or muslin circle a 1/4 inch larger than the measurement around the ball. To easily cut a circle, I fold a square of fabric in half, then in half again, and if needed, you can fold in half one more time. Measuring up from the folded tip, make a mark that is half the diameter of the ball plus 1/8 to a 1/4 inch additional. Repeat on the opposite edge. Then trim in a rounded manner between the two marks. Unfold the fabric and fit the cover around the ball. I found that it's better to be a little bit smaller than larger, as any extra bulk around the clamp screw makes it more difficult to adjust. Using a doubled thread, stitch around the edge in a 1/4 inch running stitch, finger pressing the seam over a 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch as you go. Once you've stitched all the way around, don't tie or cut the threads off just yet. Place the cover over the ball and center it, pulling up the stitches to tighten it evenly all the way around in the same manner that you did with the batting. Just one row of gathering seemed a bit loose to me, so I stitched through each pleat all the way around one more time to create a firmer neck around the clamp. Once the stitching is as tight as you like, secure your threads with a knot and run the needle up through a portion of the ball, bringing it out and clipping the threads at the surface. The last step is to pad the clamp so the clamp won't cause damage when it's tightened onto your work surface. I had these little felt pads left over from when I redid my kitchen cabinets. They're used to soften the clothes on old cabinets and are the perfect size for this tiny clamp. Another alternative would be to use the felt chair pads that come in different sizes. Now the sewing bird is ready to use. Clamp it onto the edge of your surface, tightening it firmly, but not so tight that it presses into the surface. While I had my cast on, I found that I could lightly hold fabric between my middle and index finger, but I wasn't able to apply much pressure. To try out the sewing bird, I pinned the fabric onto the ball and stitched a simple feather stitch. I did find that I had to work at tightening my stitches as I'm stitching, but having the fabric pinned to the sewing bird allowed me to get that tension that I couldn't get when I was just holding it in my weak fingers. What a difference! I recommend trying a sewing bird and see if it's something that can help you if your hands are weak or if you simply want an option other than a hoop. There are also other options for stitching one-handed that could be helpful. While looking through my supplies to find something to help me stitch, I came across this old wooden embroidery hoop that clamps to a tabletop. Unfortunately, the project I wanted to stitch on was far too bulky for this to work, but it would have been a great option for a thinner project. Another great option would be a scroll-type floor or tabletop embroidery or needlework stand. These could potentially accommodate a much bulkier project. But since I didn't have one, nor the budget to allow for the purchase of one, the sewing bird was the best option for my project. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey today of looking at sewing birds and how to make one. I hope that it will help facilitate stitching one-handed should that need arise for you. I'm so grateful you've spent this time with me today, learning a little bit about a sewing tool that we don't see used very often. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.